It's February 10th, 1984. André Charles Stander, charismatic and daring former police officer turned bank robber, was fatally shot by law enforcement in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. But how did a decorated South African police captain become one of the most infamous criminals in history? What drove him to rob over 30 banks? And how did the Stander gang, a trio of audacious criminals, execute their heists with military precision? These questions unveil a tale of crime, betrayal, and a man who lived a double life. André Stander grew up under the shadow of apartheid. His father, Major General Francois Jacobus Stander, was a high-ranking officer in the South African prison service, a fact that would later play a pivotal role in shaping André's conflicted relationship with authority. André excelled academically and athletically, earning his way into the South African police. By his mid-20s, he had risen to the rank of captain, becoming one of the youngest officers to do so. However, beneath his polished exterior, Stander harbored a disdain for the apartheid regime and the corrupt system it upheld. His role in enforcing laws became a growing source of inner turmoil. This discontent eventually morphed into a brazen rebellion. And what better way to defy the system than to exploit it from within? By the late 1970s, Stander's personal life was unraveling. His marriage to Leonie, which had begun with promise, was now on the brink of collapse. The couple first met in 1967, married in 1969, and divorced in 1971. However, they remarried in 1975, only for Leonie to walk out on him again in 1978. In 1979, they divorced for the second time. Alongside the crumbling of his marriage, Stander found himself dissatisfied with his job, a position that seemed more like a prison than a purpose. Yet, he skillfully concealed his frustration from his colleagues, masking his discontent behind the facade of professionalism. In an attempt to fill the void left by his disillusionment, Stander sought an unconventional escape. In 1977, Stander decided to rob the first bank robbery during a lunch break. Dressed in his police uniform, he flew to Durban, disguised himself with a wig and mustache. He walked into a bank in Kempton Park, armed with only a fake pistol, and calmly demanded money. Remarkably, he returned to work just in time to join the investigation of his own crime. This initial heist was a revelation for Stander. It proved how easily he could outsmart the very system he had sworn to protect. Over the next few years, Stander escalated his operations, robbing 30 banks across Johannesburg and Pretoria. His deep knowledge of police procedures allowed him to evade capture and remain steps ahead of his pursuers. During the 3 years he operated solo, Stander netted himself at least 100,000 rupees. His success fed a growing addiction to the thrill of his double life. He couldn't keep his secret to himself for long and eventually confided in his best friend, Karl von Deventer, who worked for the Bureau of State Security. He admitted to me that the first few times were sheer agony, von Deventer later recalled, but after that, he couldn't stop. He began to enjoy himself. He used to watch the faces of his victims. He was laughing up his sleeve when he committed his robberies. There was an element of sadistic bullying. Alarmed by Stander's confessions, von Deventer approached a senior colleague, and together they investigated a car Stander had parked at John Smuts Airport. Inside, they found wigs, a balaclava, a false beard and mustache, a false number plate, and masking tape. Convinced of his guilt, they left the items in place and staked out the vehicle. On January 2, 1980, they watched as Stander retrieved several items from the car. The very next day, a bank in Durban was robbed. 2 days later, on January 4th, Stander flew back to Johannesburg from Durban. Waiting for him at the arrivals lounge was Major General Cobus Visser, commander of the CID. Stander was arrested on the spot and escorted to his car. Among his belongings were $4,000 in cash, balaclava, a revolver, and false disguises. In May 1980, Stander faced trial at the Durban Supreme Court, where he was charged with 28 counts of robbery. He was convicted on 15 of them and sentenced to 75 years in prison, with some sentences running for an effective 17-year term. Following his sentencing, Stander's father expressed regret. "I forced him to become a policeman against his wishes," he admitted. He should have left the force years ago. Stander's family suggested his behavior stemmed from a traumatic incident during the Tembisa Township unrest in 1976, where he allegedly participated in a bloodbath. They claimed he shot 22 people, a notion Von Deventer firmly disputed. "I don't accept that," Von Deventer said. "He was supposed to have shot 22 people, but I never heard about it. Don't you think he would have told his best friend about it at some time or the other, if it had really happened?" While serving time at Zonderwater prison, André Stander formed an unlikely alliance with 2 other inmates. Alan Heil, a career criminal with a knack for safecracking, and Patrick Lee McCall, an expert car thief, found in Stander an ambitious and charismatic leader. Together, they devised a bold plan to form a gang that would carry out high-stakes bank robberies once they were free. Their first move came on 11 August 1983, in a meticulously orchestrated prison escape. Stander and McCall feigned injuries, convincing authorities to allow them, along with 5 other prisoners, to visit a local psychotherapist near Cullinan. Accompanied by 3 unsuspecting prison officers, the group arrived at the consulting rooms of Mrs. Amelia Grobler. In the waiting room, Stander and McCall sprang to action. Overpowering the guards with startling speed, they seized the officers' service revolvers and demanded Mrs. Grobler hand over the keys to her car. "Give us the keys," they barked. The terrified psychotherapist complied, and the duo sped off in the direction of Tembisa Township, leaving the 5 other prisoners who refused to join the escape behind. About 7 kilometers away, they turned onto a dirt road and eventually arrived at a farm in the Rayton district, owned by Mr. Martin Reichert. In the yard, Stander and McCall encountered Reichert and his teenage son, Henk. Wielding their stolen weapons, they forced Reichert to make a call to the local police station, pretending everything was fine. Moments later, Police Constable Mostert arrived, only to be ambushed. The constable was forced to exchange clothes with Stander, and then shoved into the back of his police van alongside Reichert and his son. With 3 hostages locked into the cage of the van, the fugitives continued their escape. On a secluded road, they flagged down a silver-gray Opel driven by 27-year-old nurse Naki Fausch. Bundling her into the police van with the others, they stole the Opel and disappeared into the distance. The hostages managed to escape hours later by kicking out the window between the cage and the cab, but by then, Stander and McCall had vanished. For 2 months, the pair lay low in Johannesburg, living off money Stander had secretly stashed during his bank robbing days. However, they were far from retiring. The 31st of October 1983, Stander and McCall resurfaced with another audacious move. At 10:30 a.m., they stormed the Olifantsteen Trade Test Center, guns drawn. Their target, Alan Heil. The pair freed him from custody, forcing the 2 prison wardens and 3 staff members to lie face down on the floor. The trio sped off in a 4 Cortina XR6 Interceptor, united as the now infamous Stander Gang. From that moment, the Stander Gang was born. In the weeks that followed, the trio went on an unprecedented crime spree. On November 10, 1983, they raided a gun shop in Randburg, wounding the proprietor and fleeing with an arsenal of heavy-caliber firearms and ammunition. Fully armed and using at least 3 hideouts in Johannesburg, the gang began their infamous bank-hopping spree. They would rob multiple banks in a single day, striking with military precision and vanishing without a trace. Between mid-November 1983 and mid-January 1984, the Stander gang hit 20 banks, stealing over $500,000 in total. Their audacious day came on January 19, 1984, when they pulled off 3 heists in a single day, netting an astonishing 165,000 rubles. The 3 men knew their days were numbered. They felt the police were closing in on them, and they were right. Stander himself had narrowly escaped capture on more than one occasion. Once, he was in a video rental shop in Turffontein when police raided the place. Remarkably, they didn't recognize him, and he slipped away unnoticed. Another time, a police captain spotted him at a restaurant in Maseru, but Stander managed to escape again. They realized they needed a new plan, something big. The answer? Leave the country. The trio decided to buy a yacht that could take them out of South Africa and to freedom. Toward the end of 1983, they found the perfect vessel at the Royal Cape Yacht Club in Cape Town. It was a yacht named Lily Rose, and it had a hefty price tag of 219,000 rubles. In January 1984, they began serious negotiations to buy the Lily Rose. But around the same time, the police caught their biggest break yet. During a bank robbery, hidden video cameras captured clear footage of Stander, McCall, and Heil. For the first time since the 3 had escaped prison, police had good, recent photographs of them. On January 25, 1984, the photos were published nationwide. Just 2 days later, on January 27th, Stander flew to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, using a fake passport. His job was to finalize the purchase of the yacht and make arrangements for their escape. Back in South Africa, the photos proved to be a game changer. A tip-off came in, leading police to one of the gang's hideouts in 6th Avenue, Houghton. According to reports, escort girls who had visited the gang's hideouts helped identify these safe houses. On January 28th, just a day after Stander left the country, the police began surveilling the house. The operation came to a head in the early hours of January 30th, 1984. A heavily armed police squad surrounded the house. Marksmen in bulletproof vests took up their positions, ready for action. At 5 a.m., the silence was broken by a loud announcement over the megaphone. The message was direct and firm. Come out of the house, or we shoot. McCall was alone inside. Refusing to surrender, he decided to fight back. Moving quickly from room to room, he opened fire on the police. A fierce gunfight erupted, with bullets flying everywhere. The battle intensified as the police used grenades to force their way in. When the dust settled and the police stormed inside, they found McCall's lifeless body in the hallway. He was naked, sprawled out on the floor. His determination to go down fighting had cost him his life. Just a day after their daring escape, the police discovered another hideout linked to the infamous Stander gang. The second safe house, located in Lindmeier, was discovered thanks to a growing publicity surrounding the gang's exploits. At the same time, authorities uncovered a critical piece of their plan: a scheme to buy a yacht named the Lily Rose. The revelation came from a crew member hired by André Stander and Alan Heil to deliver the yacht to the USA. On February 5, 1984, police rushed to Cape Town and seized the Lily Rose, which was worth a hefty 219,000 rubles. Not long after, a third hideout came to light. This time, it was in the rich suburb of Houghton. The gang had rented property on a 1-year lease, costing 2,000 rubles a month. In the garage, investigators found stolen luxury cars, including a yellow Porsche Targa, a car Stander was known to fancy. Yet despite these discoveries, the 2 remaining gang members, Stander and Heil, had vanished into thin air. While police hunted for the gang in South Africa, André Stander had already made his way to the United States. However, his luck ran out 10 days after the gang's third member, Patrick McCall, had been killed. On February 10th, Stander was arrested by Fort Lauderdale police for driving an unlicensed Ford Mustang he had recently purchased. He worsened his situation by using a forged driver's license and introducing himself as an Australian author named Peter Harris. Although he was photographed and released, Stander wasn't one to play it safe. That very night, he broke into the police impound yard and stole the Mustang back. The following day, he returned to the dealership and asked the salesman, Anthony Tomasello, to have the car resprayed. What Stander didn't know was that Tomasello had just read a local newspaper article about the Stander gang's notorious crimes. The description of Peter Harris stood out to him right away. As soon as Stander left the dealership, Tomasello contacted his lawyer, who advised him to report everything to the police. That night, an elite tactical team surrounded Stander's Fort Lauderdale apartment. At 10:30 p.m., Stander arrived on a bicycle. Officer Michael Van Stetina confronted him, but Stander attempted to flee. A brief struggle happened over the officer's shotgun, and in the chaos, Stander was fatally shot. He bled out in the driveway of his apartment complex as rain poured down, dying before an ambulance could arrive. After McCall's death and Stander's capture, Alan Heil made his way to the Greek island of Hydra. From there, he flew to England. But instead of the 300,000 rubles he had anticipated, the robbery yielded a mere 4,000 rubles. Disappointed, Heil moved to Spain, where his need for help led him into dangerous company. Not long after, Heil was arrested at his girlfriend's mother's home in Surrey, England. In May 1985, Alan Heil faced trial at Winchester Crown Court, where he was sentenced to 9 years in prison for armed robbery and illegal possession of a firearm. While serving his sentence, South African authorities sought his extradition, even though no formal treaty existed between South Africa and the UK. The case lingered until December 1986, when the British government decided Heil would remain in Britain. Heil was released from prison in the mid-1990s and extradited to South Africa, where he was tried for his earlier crimes. This time, he received a 33-year sentence. After years behind bars, Heil was eventually granted parole on May 18, 2005. The story of André Stander and his gang has become the stuff of legend. Their audacity captured the imagination of people worldwide, inspiring books, documentaries, and even a feature film titled Stander. For many, Stander's story is a complex one. A man caught between his disdain for an oppressive regime and his own moral failings. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to Breakout Bank for more videos.